Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is for those people who have their natal Saturn in the 10th house of career and social standing. Saturn is the planet associated with discipline and hard work and ambition. And so it's no surprise that Saturn rules the 10th house in the sign of Capricorn. So if you have Saturn in this sector, you're naturally going to be a hardworking individual. As a matter of fact, you might be a downright workaholic. And this is just how you are wired. Saturn in this house is really somebody who can become successful, but it doesn't come easily. Usually, I don't like to make these kinds of this is true for everybody, because I'm sure that there would be modifying influences that might make it a little bit easier for the person to get ahead. Maybe if you have Venus there as well. So we never say anything is going to be 100%, but just what it represents. And by the way, I want to give a shout out before I go any further to advanced-astrology.com. It's a really great site to look for the different planetary placements in houses. So it helped me to compile this list. So yeah, like I said, this will make you very disciplined, hardworking. And if you are, I was going to say, if you are like a Capricorn, this is just going to be like you on steroids. If you are somebody, let's say you're a Sagittarian like I am. I don't have Saturn in the 10th house. I have Venus. And that is a perfect example of a stark contrast. Venus in the 10th house is like, what's the easiest road for me to become successful? I'm down for that. Saturn is like, no, you have to do things methodically. You have to take your time. There's like a real sense with people who have this placement of the value of delayed gratification. So I put down here, because they had mentioned about delaying gratification, and I put time is your friend. And Saturn is father time. Saturn, by the way, is also the father, and the 10th house can be the father in somebody's life. So I'll get to that in a minute, what that can represent. Or the disciplinarian in the family, of the two parents. So a person who has this placement is going to be very disciplined, hardworking, ambitious, and also grounded. Now, I put realistic. I think they had mentioned the word realistic, but I put grounded/realistic because to me, I think they are synonymous in how they intended the meaning. Being grounded means that you are not, pie in the sky about your ambitions. You know what your talents are, you know what's going to take to achieve them, and you're willing to work for it. A person who's ungrounded has, unreasonable expectations. They may be very fanciful in their belief about, their success coming so easily. And there's a difference between being grounded and being cynical. Some people doubt that they can do something. That's not what we're talking about here. This is about being sensible, I think, is a good way of putting it too. You're somebody who sets high standards. So I don't think that I would call this a perfectionist, but you want to do quality work. You want to be good at what you do. And so I didn't see this specifically, but I would certainly believe that this could also include somebody who wants to be as qualified for whatever it is that they're doing. So whether that means having a certain amount of education or even being over educated, having like a master's degree when you only need a bachelor's degree, overqualified they call it, or getting a bunch of certifications, whether you need them or not, just so that you can say that you have the qualifications. Or I don't mean that just so you can say it, but that you have that to show off as your as proof of your competency. I would say that Saturn in the 10th would really favor those kind of outward signs of achievement. So the degrees, the certificates, and that kind of thing. You may feel insecure when you're younger, and they said that your confidence rises after your Saturn return, but there's more than one Saturn return, unless you don't live to be the age of 57 or something. So I'm assuming they mean the first Saturn return. And basically, Saturn returns occur every 30 years. So the first one occurs in your late 20s and is when you are, when Saturn goes back into the same sign as it was when you were born. This is the first Saturn return can indicate the individuation process really pretty much completing. In other words, from the parents of origin, becoming your own person. And of course, that is not necessarily official, because that might be the catalyst, and that might take a long time to fully feel like you are standing on your own 2 feet, at least psychologically. Physically, that might already be the case, but psychologically, it can take much longer sometimes. But the point being is that you've reached a certain milestone. The age of 30, I think it's interesting that we kind of look to that as really the sign of somebody being a full-blown adult in many ways. And even if they don't know about Saturn returns, it seems to be a time when people really have their own sense of themselves. Maybe they get married and they have children, and they it's like a generational thing. Well, you know what? Come to think of it, it's like the second generation. If you look at a generation being about 15 years, that's probably not entirely accurate. I don't think a generation might be more like 20 years, but it's supposed to be whenever you can reproduce. So this idea of, becoming the parent after you have been the child, I think that might be a better way instead of getting involved in generations and all that stuff. So your confidence can rise because you are becoming successful in your own right. And so you're starting to follow that path, which is associated with the 10th house in whatever area it is. And then you're starting to feel that sense of self-esteem rising. Speaking of the path that you might take, Saturn in the 10th house is great for a manager because of the discipline, the organization that is needed. You may gravitate towards government types of employment because hierarchy is connected with Saturn. So people will tend to want be very resonate very well with something that involves a hierarchy. Also, another aspect of this, it's like climbing the ladder. And they didn't mention the corporate ladder, but I did put that down here because that is certainly another one that can be indicated. And they did mention business. But that's, they mentioned, I guess, like having your own business and maybe it taking a time for it to succeed. But what I would say is that the corporate hierarchy, that is something that I could see a Capricorn person being involved in as well. Success can be delayed. Again, Saturn can be delayed. But, it's really, Saturn can be about foundations. The number 4 is connected to Saturn, and that is about foundation. And so if you think about it, if you lay down a great foundation, by the time you become successful, it's like an empire, So the person who's like a flash in the pan, who has like a real, I'm just thinking about, like, I was thinking like about in the music business, like a hit, they might be a one-hit wonder because they really did not prepare. It was almost like a fluke that they succeeded. But somebody who has been kind of in the trenches and then they suddenly emerge, that can have a greater greater continuity because they've already had the continuity. They just did not have the same level of success. And, that can sometimes happen like with YouTube where somebody has been kind of like they don't have many subscribers. I've seen this happen. They don't have many subscribers. They're just kind of plugging away, and then they finally get their day in the sun. And this can be years after they start. You can say, who knows how something like that happens. I don't believe that there are any random things in the universe. And I think that one of the nice things about Saturn in the 10th house is that it's like your just desserts. It's like you're deserving of it because you worked for it. And I do want to say, because I think there's a misconception sometimes, and I'm kind of promoting this misconception. If somebody does succeed very quickly, I don't believe that means they're not deserving of it. So I do want to make that clear. I just think that the stability factor may not be there. Like I said, kind of that rocket that just shoots off right away, but maybe doesn't have staying power compared to this, in for the long haul type of a vibe with Saturn in the 10th. And not only that, but you have that attitude, so you're not going to be impatient about it. Unless you're in Aries. Maybe if your sun is in Aries, you might be a little bit impatient, but you'll still persevere. Let's see. So let's talk about the disciplinarian in the family. Usually it'll be the father. I wish I could just say 4th house is mother, 10th house is father. I wish. But they won't let me. So the father can be, or the, parent that's most in control. I'm just going to say the father. The father can be an authoritarian. He can be cold. He can be a disciplinarian. Now you might say, well, what other thing can a father be, or a parent who has that type of control? Well, there are different schools of thought on, how to raise children. Some parents are very lax. And what do they call them? Oh gosh, is it passive parenting? No, but there's something that is the other extreme. And that I would say is not laissez-faire. Laissez-faire parents, and they just let their kids do whatever. Okay, now that's the other extreme from the authoritarian who believes that, that kind of thing, that children should be seen and not heard. The parent is always right, because they are older, because they are bigger, those kinds of things. Physical discipline is based on this concept of authoritarianism. The person who is older, the person who's in control, gets to dominate the younger person. So this kind of parenting does not go over very well with anyone. Not, needless to say, because there's a coldness to it. There's not an understanding. There's not a warmth. So sometimes the father is actually AWOL. He's missing in action. And therefore, you may have had to be self-reliant at a young age. They didn't say this, but I would assume that they mean you have to parent yourself in a lot of ways because you don't have that mentor to guide you. And who knows, maybe even if you do have that authoritarian parent, you don't feel like you can confide in them because you don't trust such a person. They're too into being in control that you can't really open up to them. You kind of keep to yourself about your problems. Now, the other thing too is that talking about your own social standing, sometimes I kind of wonder exactly what they mean by this. I'm assuming it's like status. Like, where are you on the pecking order? Are you somebody who's very popular? Do you have like a reputation? This is about your reputation too. When people talk about you, what do they say? Now, personally, I think that all of that is shallow. It doesn't really matter. There's a saying that I think is kind of a new agey thing where it says, what other people think about me is none of my business. And the point is, it doesn't matter, but we still like, especially if you're working for yourself, but even if you're working for somebody else and you're like in an industry where you're like trying to get a job and there's word of mouth, or if you have your own business, you're trying to promote yourself. You want to have a good image, right? So you may, when you're young, be shy. Because Saturn is very kind of restricted. I'm assuming that's what they mean. And so I can see it being very self-conscious. You're also, but even, there might be an awkwardness socially, even probably as an adult, and you don't like public attention. So even if you become famous, even if you become prominent in your field. I'm not saying like famous that you're in tabloids, but famous, prominent in your field, you may not like to be in the limelight. And so these kinds of things have to be worked with if you have to be, if that is something that is part of your job description, if you have to schmooze and do all that stuff and you feel very like awkward, you have to find a way to make it work, I guess. Unless you go into a totally different field where you don't have to do that kind of thing. You may have a cold personality. That's certainly true for some Capricorn sun sign individuals, or if somebody has Capricorn rising, they may come off as cold or aloof. And, these kinds of things are one facet of a person. They certainly do not, prove that the person or suggests that the person is just a cold-hearted person. You may have Saturn in the 10th house. Maybe you have the moon in Pisces and or the moon in Leo, and you're very warm or you're very caring, but you just have that demeanor that the public sees and they form that opinion, or you adopt that in that environment. And that's just how it is. We kind of show up differently when we're in different environments. The 10th house is an angular house, so it's considered one of the 4 most important areas in the chart. The first house is the house of the self, the 4th is the home environment and the family of origin, the 7th is the relationship sector, and the 10th is the public sphere, the career area. So anyway, I hope that this resonated with you. If you would like a personal chart reading, please click on the link below to see what types of readings I offer. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye.